network youth leaders in online activism. My name is Agabelacha, and I'll be your moderator today. I work at IREX, a global education and development organization where I'm a technical advisor and focus on innovation, learning, and youth. I'm joined by a diverse and dynamic set of experts and practitioners from all over the world, youth leaders who will share with us their experiences from their work related to digital networks and youth leaders. I invite them to introduce themselves now.
Hello, my name is Fabiola Morales. I'm from Guatemala and I work at Proyecto Acción Transformadora from IREX, Guatemala.
Hello, my name is Efrem Bekele. I am from Ethiopia. I am an Atlas Core Fellow and right now serving the Youth Power to Learning and Evaluation project at Making Sense International.
Good afternoon, and I'm happy to join you. My name is Khalid Hijab, and I'm joining you from Amman, Jordan. I'm the founder and executive director of Tech Tribes.
Good afternoon. My name is Nwaeze Daniel. I'm the Media and Communications Chair for Africa Youth Movements and also the Global Youth Coordinator for the UNESCO-led Media and Information Literacy. I'm joining you from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm from Africa.
Thank you all. We'd like to now turn to the virtual room and hear from those of you that are in this room to share with us your name, your organization, and location, and what your thoughts are about why youth leaders and changemakers don't join digital networks. So if you could put that in the chat, we are curious to hear your thoughts as well regarding this topic. As those responses come in, we wanted to sort of set the stage and share with you that we've seen in our work, but also in current events, that digital networks have a lot of potential for impact. We've seen how young leaders have mobilized in social movements. We've also seen how youth leaders are contributing to development and social impact work. We've seen how digital networks have equipped youth to harness the potential of economic and business opportunities. So we wanted to set the stage and sort of describe what we mean by digital networks. By digital networks, we're referring to digital platforms and tools that have now in this digital age enabled hyperconnectivity of geographically dispersed individuals that are now in a different way than before, able to exchange information, resources, collaborate, mobilize for impact, but also for economic gains. We've seen how through our work from the panelists and from others that digital networks are able to catalyze impact through relationships and networks that create value. Value such as trust-based relationships, individuals that are able to connect based on shared goals, access to information in new ways and in dynamic ways, sharing of ideas and opportunities, youth leaders being able to strengthen their credibility, their power, their voice and influence. We've been able to also see how youth leaders are leaning on these digital networks and on each other and other adult supporters to gain emotional support and goodwill through these digital networks. We've seen how collaboration with like-minded youth leaders has really enabled massive levels of change within the political sphere, economic sphere, social sphere, but also in terms of the individual work that these youth leaders are conducting. We've seen how digital networks are unleashing new ways for youth to access capacity building and knowledge for impact. So we're really excited today to share with you our thoughts and our experiences, but also to hear from you what value, what potential there might be in digital networks. We recognize that digital platforms and digital tools, and we've seen in our work how there are risks of exclusion for those that may not have access to the devices, to the connectivity. Also, there are risks such as privacy and security, where there might be harm to certain groups that might be marginalized and affected through this connectivity and expose them to higher risk through this connectivity. We also recognize that misinformation is rife in this day and age, and digital platforms have sort of a presence of that within these digital networks. So there are the pluses as well as the minuses, but we're really excited to kick off this conversation and hear from the learnings from the ground, from around the world, from the panelists, but also from others that we've been able to engage in Kenya around the topic of youth networks. So we see some insights coming in from our chat, where we have individuals coming in from Lagos, Nigeria, DC, Washington, so a global audience here. We see how the value of digital networks for youth include ability to strengthen their social capital, the ability to join the movements, being able to work together towards shared priorities. So some of these thoughts align with what we are kicking off with, but we really want to dig into very concrete stories and experiences from our panelists now. So today we'll be able to hear from these concrete stories of impact and how digital networks are equipping youth leaders to have such impact. We'll have also an open discussion between our panelists, and we'll invite you to chime in the chat while that discussion is going on around the topic of how digital tools can equip and catalyze change for youth leaders to achieve impact, but also what we need to keep in mind to really create high impact digital networks that can foster inclusion and engagement, something that's critically important in this day and age when we're more and more in a virtual first, digital first environment. So I now invite my panelists to share each a story about an aha moment that they've had that helped them realize the power of youth networks, leveraging digital networks for impact and activism. Fabiola?
Well, thank you. First, I would like to highlight some important facts of the history of Guatemala. So Guatemala has some historical conflicts, and adding to some other problems, being part of social organizations or being involved in some political spaces could be in some territories unsafe, difficult, and risky activity. But even this situation in 2015, Guatemala was living a political crisis as a result of corruption cases. But a lot of the protests and social movement that occurs in that moment were led by young people. So new organizations leading by the same youth were emerging in this crisis situation. So we, as a project, we thought this is a great opportunity to give some political training to these new leaders. And we thought of this idea of the network in 2019. So we thought of creating a safe space where young people can express their different point of views, can learn and mobilize information and knowledge, but other to connect with other youth persons. But unfortunately, we received the news that the project will not continue. But we thought, although the project ends, the network must continue. So if you can change to the next slide. So we thought, how do we create conditions for the network sustainability? How we can start this transitional process where the same youth can lead this network? So we thought of two main ideas. The first one is, how can we create, but not only create, but to maintain the identity of this network? So we can use the transformational leadership principles to maintain this concept of collaboration and collective creations, and also to think about autonomy and sustainability. We developed this idea of a network, a weaver's strategy. We define a network as a person who is going to create and to unify all these new links. So we are going to decentralize the network, but also allows to new people be part of this space. We truly believe in this network because we think Guatemala needs new leaders with new ideas and new waves to solve or try to solve these historical problems in our country. So thank you for the time, and I would like to share more about this experience in our second part of the activity.
Thank you, Fabiola. Khaled, if you'd like to share your story.
Great. Thank you so much. In the fall of 2012, Hala, a 22 years old female, was found dead at the Dead Sea. And she basically was drowned by her male sibling, simply because she owned a smartphone. And to her, the smartphone was really the window to the world, a channel to connect with friends, loved ones, family, and peers. In a male-dominant society, females are yet to realize that the fight for their basic rights is one that is, paved with challenges and the stigma of much misunderstood and misinterpreted activism. This is not the first nor the last time that a crime as such happened and in this nature. The problem is far more complex. The Jordanian Penal Code legitimizes such crimes under the honor crimes or crimes committed in the name of honor. And in doing so, anyone who commits a crime gets a sentence that is unreasonable, sometimes only a few months in prison. In such crimes, personal right weighs much more than public ones. What makes this worse is the fact that law allows rapists and murderers to get away with their crime simply by marrying the victim. In the absence of research, data, and statistics on the topic, activists always found it difficult to act and mobilize for change. But this specific crime changed everything. This is where no honor in crimes emerged by a young youth-led movement in Jordan to basically bring the basic notion that every person, male or female, has the right to live their life the way they wish. Soon enough, this became a movement. No Honor in Crimes decided to basically speak to the Jordanian society by utilizing technology and online channels to first make the distinguish that these people that we're talking about, young people that we're talking about, are not victims, they're actually survivors. By launching public campaigns, No Honor in Crimes highlighted that there is really no honor in crime. In fact, honor should never be tied with crime. Our aha moment really became very obvious when young people were able to use technology to basically gather data on crimes, help victims and survivors share stories, and create a common space, safe space where lessons are shared and learned, and then push all of that to kind of hold public officials accountable to basically move them for action. On August 2017, the majority of members of the lower house of the Jordanian parliament voted to repeal Article 308 of the Penal Code, which has allowed rapists to avoid the jail term if they married the victim. This was our biggest success and the biggest success of the network. And I'd be more than happy to share more on how technology was used in the term of this panel discussion.
Thank you, Khaled. Would you like to share a little bit more about the attributes related to the network as well?
Sure. We eventually felt that GL 962 and the No Honor in Crimes campaign ended up fostering a number of things: a space for personal and professional growth, a safe space for young people to express themselves and to share stories of impact and to share personal stories that they felt other peers could basically learn from. It really fostered a sense of purpose. Just because young people were now setting up the public agenda of what the government needed to work on, by upvoting and downvoting using technology to really amplify that voice and need, the public agenda was set. And eventually, this created public digital accountability on decision makers because they all of a sudden became visible to the public, and their opinion on certain topics now mattered much more than before. And they, instead of becoming the stakeholders or the opponents, became the allies of the campaigns, because most of these campaigns would basically align with their own public or political agenda.
Thank you, Khaled. I think what's so interesting also is how some of that data was made visible to the decision makers, as you said earlier, and how that was holding the decision makers accountable to the priorities of the youth, as the data was showing. Thank you. We'll now hear from our next panelist, Ephraim.
Well, thank you very much, Saga, and thank you very much, our audience. I would start with an introduction about our network, which is a youthlead.org, or Youth Lead Network, which is a project by Youth Power to Learning and Evaluation, a USAID funded project. It was launched in 2018 at the World Bank Youth Summit, and we have reached more than 118 countries, and young people from these countries sign up to the website, and they have their own profile, and they can access different resources and materials. And we are also now broadcasting the website in 3 languages, and we have also dedicated country pages for the young people who are members on the site. Currently, we have more than 12,000 members. We've posted 629 projects and 1,594 funding opportunities. So it's basically, the network is to generate knowledge and promote learning on PYD, which stands for Positive Youth Development. And a PYD, or Positive Youth Development, is a holistic framework for youth development that assumes that all youth have access and should be invested in through inclusion, access, education, and training. So basically, this is an introduction about the website, and we have different young change makers on the site, and it's open for any of those young change makers. So through this process since 2018, I would love to share stories of impact, 2 stories actually. One story was during COVID. One of our ambassadors, we have ambassadors in the program, and one of our ambassadors from Nigeria, West Africa, she decided to start her community work or project against the COVID-19 breakout. And she found out that there are very few people who knew what's going on, and also how COVID spreads, and how to help them also on the process. And then she realized that they had a little information or no information about COVID-19. And what she did was she collaborated with her team in Nigeria, and also organizations and other individuals online. And also she used the radio. Then she brought this help and support to the cause. Finally, she managed to reach 85 families and 2,000 students through the digital spaces. And this was a big success during the early stages of COVID-19. Another story was from Mauritius. So we have also another group, which is called YAG, or a Youth Advisory Group. And there was one team member who was working on the advocacy area. And since COVID-19 breakout, she was not able to continue her advocacy work. And then she decided to join the digital space using a digital activism. And during the digital activism process, she did a lot of research, a lot of personal research on how to wisely use the digital space for activism. And then she became successful through the digital activism area. And even she managed to get more audience through the process. Next slide, please. Okay, so through all this process on our site, we have listed like 4 areas, 4 attributes to bring a high impact digital network. The first one is youth inclusion. As you can see on the screen, we have ambassadors from different parts of the country, the world, Every 6 months, we invite young leaders as an ambassador, and they give us different options, different opinions about how to utilize the digital spaces. And also the second one is engagement and collaboration. So we engage and collaborate with the youth ambassadors. They have their own social issue webinars. They do their own events, and they upload their own resources, which can be helpful for other young people. And this became a great source for engagement and collaboration. A third one will be learning. So we have more than 3,500 resources, events, and funding opportunities where anyone can go there, create a profile, and bring a learning into the space. Finally, it's leadership and advocacy. So as you can see on the screen, we usually have different campaigns, contests, and social issue campaigns. So through these campaigns and social issue causes, we promote leadership. We bring advocacy to the platform so that young people can have a space to talk about something that they really care about. So these are 4 things where we have found very strong attributes to a high impact digital network. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ephraim. Daniel, we'd like to hear from you next.
Thank you so much, Sagan. And thank you so much. It was awesome listening to the many impact that young people are doing, and I'm so amazed to see how interconnected the impacts we are doing, despite being in different focus areas. So for us at Africa Youth Movement, we actually a product of digital technology. We're a product of the revolution around digital technology and maximizing digital space. So initially, we started by IREX, who is now the past African Union Youth Environment. So the idea was to start a Facebook page, to have a conversation around youth engagement online. And, it quickly moved to, young people having to have these conversations. And then we began to see how can we transform those online conversations into physical conversations. And that was how, the concept of African Movement Hubs were born. And we started having country hubs. And now we have, country hubs in about 14 countries. And we've hosted like AYM Forum in 2017 in Nairobi, in 2018 in Ghana, and then in 2019 was in Accra. So we started moving from online conversations to physical conversations, and and all of our conversations are digitally powered, and they were building networks of young people, around our theory of change. And our theory of change is, centered around 3 key areas, which is to empower, to connect, and to mobilize. And at the center of this, these 3 issues is to be able to transform, conversations around young people and push for Pan-Africanism and greater youth involvement. So we've been able to youth participation, in the digital space. And one of the ways that we've done this, was the sexy farming campaign we did last, it was in 2017, I think. And so the idea was, how do we, make farming more accessible? How do we make farming more susceptible to young people? And we wanted to make it look very attractive and accommodating to young people. And the concept of sexy farming came. And it went beyond our imagination, because we just wanted to have a basic conversation. But then we started having young people saying, oh, I have farmed somewhere. Oh, I can farm. I want to go back to my village and try out some farming. And then we had people in different countries begin to exchange ideas as to what they can do, with their farms. And, we had experts linking up with them and sharing these ideas. And it was very impressive. And we even had Mo Ibrahim talking about it in one of the Mo Ibrahim forums, how, the sexy farming campaign have been able to redesign and revolutionize the way young people are beginning to see farming and making it look more attractive. The next slide, please, Sega. So following this, last year during the COVID-19 pandemic, yeah, thank you. So last year during the, as the COVID-19 pandemic enraged, we began to see that a set of people, young people are being marginalized, and those are, migrants and refugees. People are beginning to see them as the careers of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then, we started to think, how can we, change this narrative? How can we begin to make people see that COVID-19 is not dependent on how you look or where you're from, but, it's a virus that is kind of spreading on its own through human contact, and it doesn't matter if the person is a foreigner or the person is your country person. And so we also try to use this to raise awareness as to, the movement of the viruses across borders and things like that. So we came up with for the material campaign around it. But the very unique thing about this is that we looked at, using people's language, connecting to people in their own language, in the language that you understand, and not just in basic English. And we looked at, the migration corridors around West and Central Africa. The project was supported by Dakar office. So we looked at the migration corridors around the West and Central Africa, and came up with strategies around. We worked on, I think it was about 21 languages, about years, and trying to reach people in their various communities and all. And as you can see, we had very massive impressions and very massive engagements, and which people began to say, oh, because this was in their language, in Bete, in French, in Swahili, in Tiv, like a lot of languages around this West Central Africa. And so I look forward to sharing more about the work we've done in the digital space, when we get deeper into the conversation. Thank you very much. And over to you now, Sega.
Thank you so much, Daniel. So we heard from our panelists such diverse stories. We heard how Africa Youth Movement actually started as an online campaign, an online group of youth coming together because they had shared ideas and shared purpose, and then came into this offline group that is local, that is organized, that is using digital tools. We heard how they were able to gain access to and attention of business moguls, for instance, and gain support for some of their campaigns. We heard how in Jordan, the youth have been able to take action around a very harmful effect and social issue, and again, use digital tools and data to bring attention to that and bring accountability of the decision makers. We heard how in Guatemala, digital networks were the way that youth leaders and newly minted political leaders that were getting activated were able to find a safe space, build their capacity, collaborate, and have some support to sustain their impact and have ownership of doing that. We were able to see how so many of these activities also came to bear when the COVID-19 hit, and youth lead members, youth ambassadors were taking action and mobilizing impact using digital platforms. So we wanted to share with you some of these stories, but also tie in some of the lessons learned that we've had from our work around youth-led networks. So within IREX, we gathered a variety of practitioners in Kenya who have been working with youth and youth networks, similar to the ones that we heard about today. And we had a chance to learn from them, these practitioners, donors, as well as youth, what really is also contributing to high impact networks. So it's, in addition to the stories that you've heard, we wanted to share with you the lessons learned from that group of people in Kenya. We learned that involvement, whether it be through the youth leaders that work towards common goals, or through bringing in the adults to provide support and really be engaged, was a key attribute to these high impact networks. And leveraging digital networks is another way to bring visibility and impact. We also saw how shared purpose and goals were really interesting and important for members to identify and align around in order to catalyze impact. We heard from Khaled how upvotes and downvotes were a way that digital tools were able to give a space and a platform for youth to voice their preferences and their priorities. And then the platform itself did that work to show what that collective was really prioritizing at that point in time. We saw how youth agency was really important, that youth being able to envision how they want to participate and what they want to do in order to have individual and community gains. We heard about that from the Guatemala story, where young youth weavers were the one that were now leading, taking charge of that network and shaping what the network will be. We found how the youth mindset and having a mindset of servant leadership where you're giving but also getting from the network was really important. So it was really interesting to hear from Ephraim how, you know, some of these groups were corralling their peers to give back to their community, right? But also how a variety of the networks that we heard about were really helping these youth build their skills, build their opportunities. We saw how linkages were really important, which means that it's not a really isolated group that's always sitting on that digital platform and talking, but rather we're bringing new people in, as Fabiola said, and we're also allowing adults to plug into this network, provide support, like the youth lead example that Ephraim talked about, where there's funding opportunities that are being funneled into this network. We saw how activities are really crucial. So the examples that Daniel shared around these campaigns, whether it be to make farming sexy or to really understand how speaking to in the local language on that digital platform is able to change people's minds and social norms around people's understanding of COVID. So these stories really align with some of these attributes that we heard about from that group in Kenya, the practitioners that are leveraging youth networks for impact. What was interesting about what we found from that white paper, though, is that youth networks are not very well, as well understood as we might want. We found that there are quite a lot of learning questions that we might want to ask. What kind of impact are they able to activate? What might contribute to inclusion, whether that be in the digital space or outside of it? How is the building of social capital and influence really being shaped? Daniel talked about how Mo Ibrahim, a business mogul, was able to pay attention to a group of youth working on this. What does that really look like? So there's quite a lot of evidence that is needed around this, and that was one of the main insights that came out from this white paper. So now I'll open it up for our group discussion, and we'd love to hear from you as well on your thoughts on these questions. How do the digital tools specifically help youth catalyze impact in new ways maybe they haven't been able to do before? And then how do practitioners need to prioritize the inclusion and engagement? What do they need to keep in mind to keep that high impact network? We've already heard a lot about what contributes to high impact networks, but we'll dig into what contributes to inclusion. So I'd like to invite my panelists to share their thoughts on these questions. We'd be curious also to hear from you all if you have any questions or thoughts for this discussion. Would anybody like to share? Maybe Khaled, would you like to start?
Sure. These are two really important questions, pertaining to this session in specific, because I fully understand that a lot of people in the room might be asking, this is all great, the impact is great, but what are some of the tools that, if used in solo or in combination, could actually achieve that impact? In the case of, GIL 962 and what we were doing and the No Honor in Crimes campaign, again, I think the issue that we identified right from the start is that it's really difficult for young people to be activists and be in politics because it basically is a scary space, especially when, the notions of personal rights and activism and the right to expression are not, are still vague in most of these laws, at least in the region. So GIL 962 came in to address really the fears and challenges to participation in the public sphere. That's, number one. We created an alternative space for young people to feel safe, to feel that their voices are heard, to feel that there's really less monitoring and more kind of encouragement to put in their opinions. Digital helped address those fears and challenges especially the challenges to physical participation. It also helped decentralize both the knowledge sharing and the knowledge production, in addition to the participation. So in a way, we tried to recreate and redefine what the public sphere stood for. We wanted to create a new democracy of a new nature, and let young people practice a new type of democracy by simply being active, going from them being passive recipients of services to active participants in the decision-making process. Digital helped us by first establishing the notion that data and digital data is power. Because we did not want to go with the notion that harassment can be generalized. On the contrary, we actually wanted to find that by data, knowledge, and research. We adopted digital mapping, and we created a digital map through which young people could basically report incidents of both rape, harassment, or even crime in their own communities through that digital map. Then we tied that digital map to basically help young people co-create and be co-creators of the public agenda by helping them take all of these votes and then upvoting and downvoting them using digital voting to really set a public agenda that's based on their own voices. So whenever a young person votes for a certain issue that he or she sees in a community, that vote or that issue becomes at the top or at the top of that ladder, of that priority ladder. And then we would take all of these issues that are of priority on an annual basis and push those as topics of interest and priority to public officials, to parliamentarians, to decision makers. So we could basically gain their support. Now, the tricky part is, because this is a digital network, we really wanted to limit that participation to a digital space, because again, we wanted to create that safe space where young people could feel that they could do much and create impact and realistic impact. So eventually we adopted what we call digital public accountability, which is basically to push all of these issues to public officials and parliamentarians in the online space using different social media platforms, and to really ask them the very simple question: where do you stand from this topic? And take those public statements and really hold those public officials accountable. So in this sense, the only thing that these public officials would feel is that they would need to really become allies to that movement instead of becoming opponents, because they've already made public statements and they would be held accountable to what they're saying. And because of all of this movement was able to kind of create much impact simply because a strategy to how all of these tools, multi-channel tools, were put together to really utilize not only the tools, but to also utilize the digital skills and the creativity of combining all those tools together.
Thank you, Khaled. We actually have a question from the audience related to the way the tools were utilized. Can you speak to how the tools were used? Did youth participate anonymously? You referred to how we were able to utilize this platform to actually make public participation in such a risky social topic safe for engagement. So did the youth participate anonymously? Could you speak to how the stories were gathered, the mapping process of the honor killings as well?
Great. Yes, that's a great question. To sign up for the network, youth would have to put in their personal information. To report an issue in their community, the reporting is fully anonymous. To also contribute with a story, the stories are anonymous. And then I understand that some people might be asking, so how do you actually verify most of these cases? How do you make sure that what's being reported on the map is actually correct? There is a task force of young people whose job is to really make sure that reports on the map are ticked and verified by really calling in or verifying the information. So if there's a certain incident that happened in a community where a phone number is provided or a certain location is provided, that task force would actually call and inquire whether that incident actually happened. And they would document all of this as part of the reference for this specific case. If the report that came in was not verified, it would have that badge on it that this is not a verified report. So this actually helped us really gather the data and information needed based on true data, so that when we take it to the police station or to the parliamentarians, we would have enough evidence to back our cases up.
Great, thank you so much, Khaled. Would any of the other panelists like to speak to this first question, how digital tools specifically are catalyzing impact for youth in different ways that maybe they have not been able to when it comes to youth networks? And if anybody is able to speak to low technology digital tools like SMS and radio, if there are experiences of mobilizing young people with utilizing those, please also chime in on that.
Okay, so I'll just.
Please go ahead, Daniel.
Can you hear me, Sega?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So like, so one of the things that we found out was that digital tools kind of helped young people, simplify the knowledge for young people to make us understand that, you know, we could actually mobilize and we can stay in one location, but actually mobilize people from the from other parts of the world. You know, you're bringing young people, you're bringing other people from, you know, from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, from Latin America, the cause for your portion, and also being very supportive of that cause, you know, sharing, you know, connecting that feeling or connecting the problems that you're having to what they are also facing, and then being able to also join in that. And we've seen a lot of how young people connected to, you know, global hashtag, like in Nigeria when we had the NSAS global hashtag, or when we had this Justice for Nura hashtag. We see how people from around the world came together to support, you know, the messaging and the narrative the young people are pushing. So like digital tools have helped us see that, you know, it's no longer you know, it's no longer just us, but there are other people who are like us around the world who are so willing to join us and, you know, to also support us in the impacts that we're doing. Another way also, it has also shown us that we literally do not need, you know, very massive budget, like how a lot of organizations have hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars for, you know, promotional budget or for campaign budget. But no, like digital tools have, you know, some of them coming at as free tools, or some of them coming as very cheap, very affordable tools, you know, that young people can begin to use and begin to amplify the impact that they're doing and begin to, you know, promote or build consciousness around the work that they're doing. And like the example of Africa Youth Movement, we started out as a Facebook group, and then from Facebook we begin to connect and interact with ourselves and begin to establish in countries, and that's how we began to spread. That being said, if you look at what we need to put in mind, one of the things that I think that I love to mention of what participants can do or keep in mind is that irrespective of its digital tools, and irrespective that we are young, it's not just for us. You know, we have like older adults, we have like older generations who are also willing to be part of this process, who also want to be part of this impact or part of this change. So like we as also young people should begin to understand or keep in mind that we should also accommodate, we should also be able to build narratives or build impacts that are also going to extend to affecting positively people of the older generation, and also being able to build their support, not just in the digital space, but also you know, in the physical space, to be able to help us achieve faster whatever social impact or the campaign that it is that we're pushing. And also because for the fact that they are humans, and for the fact that there are elder brothers, elder sisters, there are parents, there are grandparents and mothers. So it's also a reason why I think that we should also keep in mind that we should also build campaigns and, you know, social change issues that they can also actively partake in and also actively support us in, and not a us versus them issue, but rather a we or a collective approach. Thank you, and over to you now, Sega.
Thank you so much, Daniel. What's really interesting about what you're describing is also this partnership between youth and adults and how digital networks are able to really catalyze that. And we saw that not only in the Africa Youth Movement example, but also in the example from Jordan, where decision makers were really benefiting from the data and stories that were coming out around these honor killings. And that was really making them, providing them with evidence and concrete information about the priorities of youth, but also the reality on the ground, such that they can rethink and work on better policies for the whole country. We also saw in the Youth Lead example how linking the youth through that platform with adult networks that are supporters and funding opportunities is able to catalyze impact for the youth as well. I'd like to invite Fabiola, if you'd like to speak to either of these questions in relation to the work in Guatemala.
Okay, yes. Well, with the first question, we think the digital part, especially in this COVID situation, enable us to reach more young people, because some structural conditions, difficult, more people sometimes can be able to participate in some political or training spaces because of the difficulty of mobilization. So the digital part allow us to reach to this local community, to this person that also sometimes have the difficulty, because most of the people who participate in the network study, but also have a job. They are also workers. So the digital tool allows them to have a specific time so they can combine their daily activities, but also have the opportunity to be part of this training and these safe spaces to start their path in the social organization, and for others to improve their skills related with political training and political skills. And with the second question, because we are like this new network, we are starting our path, but in our experience, we think it is important to be creative in this time. And with this, I'm meaning we have to challenge ourselves to think, how can we make different things in a different way? How can we combine, like you say, like this adult perspective, but also the ideas and the new challenge that youngs are providing us? So the creative part for me is essential. We have to be able to be dynamic in these spaces. We're trying to constantly change and thinking, how can we try to create not only safe spaces, but only spaces that we can feel part of the space. And regarding with the question of the challenge in this specific case, that girls and young women that work have to have access to internet. In our case, we have the same problems, especially youth from, like I said, local communities. We know that there are some structural conditions that unfortunately we are not able to solve, but in this case we support this person by give them an amount so they can buy these internet cards. So with this card they can participate in this session, so you can cover 1 or 2 hours. So in this way you can participate, and also have the opportunity, if you are going to continue participating in the next meeting, we also can provide you this financial support. But first we need to have this information to know how many persons of the networks would like to have this support. So they have the minimum conditions to participate in active way in our meetings. So I know that it's not necessarily going to solve the problem of the internet access, but could be a way to support this person and have the opportunity to participate in this kind of spaces. So I think this is what I can share.
Thank you so much, Fabiola. What's really interesting from what you shared also is just the importance of really surfacing needs within these networks and using those needs to shift and shape the programmatic approach, right? And that this is also a common theme that we're hearing from all of these networks, that these networks are more powerful when we better understand what the needs are of the people on the ground. Like the Africa Youth Movement example, we heard how different local people used their own languages, local languages on these platforms in different ways. So in that way, we heard from Ephraim that the youth ambassadors within Youth Lead were also adapting and shifting based on what was needed within the COVID environment. So this adaptability being and this responsiveness to need being really important, not only for inclusion, but also higher engagement. So we have a couple of questions coming in from the audience. And Ephraim, I'd love for you to also share your thoughts as well. So the questions that we have are, what are some platforms that have been successful to engage youth? And then we also have a question about what are examples of low-tech digital engagement tools. So either Ephraim, Khaled, or others who would like to chime in on those questions.
Yes, thank you, Zach. I would love to highlight on the low-tech question. So sometimes the digital space or the digital activities might be also less inclusive for young people living in different parts of the world, especially in remote areas where there is no internet or where there is the price of a technology device like a phone or laptops is very expensive. So 2019, I would love to share my story just in 1 minute. In 2019, I was also a Youth Lead ambassador. So I was in Addis in Ethiopia, and I had 6 months of opportunity to participate in the Youth Lead ambassadorship. So one of the challenge we faced, I also faced while doing my project, was the issue of technology. So internet connectivity, availability of devices. So one of the projects I was engaged was a radio project, which is a low-tech project. But this radio project was for young people who are married and who are going through violence and abuse, especially sexual abuse, and how this is affecting their mental health. So we started the radio program, and the radio program used reality-based stories, and we changed the names for the sake of safety. We changed the names of the audiences and the caller. And also we change the locations, names, any of these triggers that can bring more violence to the family. So through that radio show, young people, especially women in a very abusive marriage life, they started calling us, they started mentioning, they started understanding what's abuse and what's not abuse and what's normal and what's a challenge. So then we started also a call-in center, a toll-free call center, where people can call and record their voice. So whenever the radio show is not live, people call, young people call, and they record their voice, and we broadcast that one whenever we're live on the radio. So that brought a lot of new knowledge, a lot of network and safe space for married young women to the issue of abuse and mental health. Then we start referring them to the nearby mental support. That was one thing I can remember. Second thing I would love to mention, sorry about the time, is that what we've learned from digital tools for the young leaders is that this space can bring a lot of learning, a fast and easier learning, so that young people can go to their projects and apply those tools. So I would say that from the Youth Lead experience, it was the success was it brought us a lot of learnings easily. So we can send surveys, and young people send different surveys. They upload different resources, and they connect with their peer leaders also, so that they can facilitate learning in a better time and condition.
Thank you so much, Ephraim. Unfortunately, we're very close to time, so I just wanted to invite our participants to click on this link, and you'll have it in your chat as well. If you'd like to stay in touch with us. I wanted to wrap up this session by just sharing how it's so inspiring how young people are already using digital platforms, and they're already in youth networks, right? There is so much activity and there's so much work being done, as we heard from all of our panelists. And the call to action that we would like to put forth is there needs to be more learning about this. There is so much potential, that there are so many pieces about that we need to better understand to utilize both digital networks as well as the youth networks for impact, because young change makers are busy on all of these different platforms, whether that be existing platforms like the social networks or the platforms like the Youth Leads and the one that from Tech Tribe. The Africa Youth Movement is using existing social networks. So there is quite a lot that we need to learn about in order to harness the potential of these. So we thank you all for joining us. We'd love to stay in touch with you, hear from you also what you would like to, what you are thinking about and wanting to learn about digital networks and youth networks. And I'd like to thank my incredible and inspiring panelists for sharing so many great insights with us. Thanks everybody for joining us.